They say dogs can't truly understand human sorrow. But what if I told you I once held the key to healing a broken heart? What if I told you about a secret that waited 2 years in a wooden box? About a daughter who thought she was too late? And about the last person to witness an old man's final smile? My name is Charlie. I walk these halls where time moves differently, where stories end and begin in the same breath. And I'm about to share with you the most beautiful secret I've ever kept. One that changed everything I thought I knew about love, loss, and the perfect timing of miracles. You see, sometimes the most important messages aren't the ones we speak aloud. They're the ones we write in silence, hoping someone will find them when hope seems lost. This is the story of such a message, and why I was chosen to deliver it. So settle in, and let me tell you about the day I became a bridge between a father's endless love and a daughter's endless regret. And how sometimes, being too late can be exactly the right time. For 3 years now, I've padded these sterile hallways of Sunset Manor Nursing Home as a 7-year-old golden retriever. My therapy dog vests a familiar sight to residents, nurses, and the occasional visiting family member. My job is simple: bring comfort to those who need it most. But if I'm being honest, they've taught me more about life than I ever expected to learn. The nursing home sits on a quiet street lined with bare oak trees, their branches reaching toward a December sky that seems perpetually gray. Inside, the walls are painted soft yellow, someone's attempt to make this place feel less like a waiting room for eternity. But I know better. I can smell the sadness that settles in corners like dust, the worry that clings to door frames, the hope that fades a little more each day no one comes to visit. My days follow a rhythm as predictable as my own heartbeat. Morning rounds at 8, where I visit Mrs. Patterson, who always saves me a piece of her toast. Afternoon therapy sessions in the community room, where I let Mr. Rodriguez tell me the same stories about his grandchildren for the 100th time. Evening rounds at 6, checking on those who struggle most when the sun disappears and loneliness grows heavy. But there was one room I visited more than others. Room 237, the room where George McLaughlin spent his days staring out the window at a world that seemed to have forgotten him. George was 87, with hands spotted by age and eyes the color of faded denim. His hair, what little remained, stood up in silver wisps that made him look perpetually surprised. He'd been at Sunset Manor for 2 years, ever since a stroke left him weak on his left side and dependent on others for the simplest tasks. The nurses spoke about him in hushed tones, how his daughter lived across the country, how she called sometimes but hadn't visited in over a year. They mentioned it wasn't from lack of love, but from the crushing weight of her own life. Single mother, demanding job, financial struggles. The kind of circumstances that make promises to visit next month stretch into seasons, then years. But George never spoke bitterly about Sarah, his daughter. When he talked to me, and humans always talk to dogs like we understand everything, he'd share memories of her childhood. How she used to climb into his lap for bedtime stories. How proud he was when she graduated college. How he wished he could tell her it was okay, that he understood why she couldn't come. "Charlie," he'd whisper, his voice like autumn leaves. "She's got her own life to live. I just wish I could see her one more time, you know? Just to tell her I'm proud of how strong she became." I'd rest my head on his knee, feeling the tremor in his hands as he stroked my fur. In those moments, I became his confidant, his friend, his family. I was the witness to his quiet dignity, his patient love, his gentle acceptance of a loneliness that would break lesser hearts. I should have known then that the peaceful rhythm of our days was about to change. Because in a place like this, change rarely comes as a friend. Then came the morning that changed everything. December 18th. I remember because the Christmas tree in the lobby had been decorated the night before, and George had spent the evening watching the twinkling lights from his wheelchair. I noticed it immediately when I entered his room for morning rounds. The smell was different. Not the usual mixture of antiseptic and George's aftershave, but something else. Something that made my instincts prick up like radar. George was in bed, not his usual spot by the window, and his breathing sounded different. Shallow, labored. "Morning, Charlie boy," he whispered, but his voice was fainter than morning mist. His eyes, though, those faded denim eyes still held their warmth when they found mine. "Come here, buddy. Come lie down with me." I didn't need to be asked twice. I carefully positioned myself at the foot of his bed, close enough to feel the rhythm of his breathing, to offer whatever comfort my presence could provide. The nurses came and went throughout the morning, checking vitals, adjusting medications, speaking in those careful, professional tones that somehow made the room feel more fragile. Dr. Henley arrived around noon. I watched from my spot as she examined George, her face grave with the kind of expression I'd learned to recognize over my years here. After she finished, she stepped into the hallway with Nurse Patricia, but their voices carried. "How long?" Patricia asked quietly. "Could be hours, could be a day or two. But I'll call his daughter." My ears perked up. Sarah. Finally, Sarah would come. George would get to see her one more time. Tell her all the things that had been gathering in his heart like snow on a windowsill. But as the hours passed, I began to understand that timing doesn't always align with hope. The first call went to voicemail. Then the second. By evening, they'd reached Sarah at work, and I could hear the nurse's side of the conversation from the hallway. "Yes, Miss McLaughlin, I understand you're in the middle of an important presentation. No, we can't predict exactly when. Yes, I understand the flights are expensive." George heard it too. I saw the way his shoulders sank deeper into the pillow, the way his fingers stopped their restless fidgeting with the blanket edge. But when Nurse Patricia came back to check on him, he managed a smile. "She'll come when she can," he told her. "Sarah's always been responsible. She'll figure it out." That night, I didn't leave his room. I couldn't. Something in the way he looked at me, something in the careful way he spoke, told me this was important. This was the moment when being a therapy dog meant more than tricks and comfort. It meant being present for something sacred. George spent the night talking to me in whispers, his voice growing softer as the hours passed. He told me about Sarah's first day of school, how she'd cried and held onto his leg, about teaching her to ride a bicycle in the park, running behind her until she realized she was pedaling on her own, about her high school graduation, how beautiful she looked in her cap and gown, how his chest had swelled with pride. "I wrote it all down, you know," he said around 3 in the morning, his words barely audible above the hum of the heating system. "In that wooden box Sarah gave me for Father's Day years ago. Every day since her mother died, I've written her a little note. Things I wanted to tell her, memories I didn't want to forget. Silly things, important things. I kept thinking I'd give them to her when she visited." But his voice trailed off, and I felt his hand settle on my head with the weight of years. The next morning, December 19th, started with unusual stillness. George was awake when I opened my eyes, staring at the ceiling with a peaceful expression I'd never seen before. The labored breathing had eased into something that seemed almost content. "Charlie," he whispered, and I lifted my head to meet his gaze. "I need you to do something for me, boy. Can you do that?" I moved closer, pressing my snout gently against his palm. "When Sarah comes, and she will come, I know she will, I need you to show her that wooden box on my dresser. The one with the brass corners. Can you remember that? It's important, Charlie. More important than anything. Around noon, the phone calls resumed. Sarah had booked a red-eye flight, would arrive by evening. George smiled when they told him. The first genuine smile I'd seen in days. She's coming, he told me, his voice stronger than it had been in hours. My girl is coming home. But time, I've learned, doesn't negotiate with love. What I witnessed next would teach me that sometimes the most important promises are the ones we make when we think no one is listening. At 4:17 p.m. on December 19th, George McLaughlin drew his last breath. I know the exact time because I was watching the bedside clock, waiting for 6 p.m. when Sarah's flight would land. He'd been peaceful all afternoon, occasionally opening his eyes to look at me, his hand resting on my back like an anchor. Then, in a moment so quiet it seemed the world held its breath, he smiled. Not the careful, polite smile he gave the nurses, not the wistful smile he wore when talking about Sarah. This was different. This was the smile of a man who had made peace with his journey, who had loved fully and was ready to let go. Thank you, Charlie, he whispered, so softly I might have imagined it. Take care of my girl when she gets here. And then he was gone. Just like that. No drama, no struggle, just a gentle exhale and a stillness that filled the room like water filling a glass. I stayed with him until the nurses came. I don't know why. Instinct maybe, or loyalty, or some deeper understanding that this moment required a witness. When Nurse Patricia found us 20 minutes later, she didn't shoo me away immediately. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, her hand pressed to her mouth, before making the calls that needed to be made. The next few hours blurred together. Medical procedures I didn't understand, paperwork, phone calls. But through it all, I kept thinking about George's request. The wooden box. Sarah would need to see the wooden box. She arrived at 8:43 p.m., and I heard her before I saw her. The sound of heels clicking rapidly down the hallway, then stopping abruptly outside room 237. A sharp intake of breath. Then a sound I'll never forget. The kind of sob that comes from a place so deep it changes the air around it. I'm too late, she whispered to Nurse Patricia. I'm too late. Sarah McLaughlin looked like her father in ways that went beyond genetics. She had his eyes, that same faded denim blue, though hers were swollen with tears and exhaustion. Her dark hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and her business clothes were wrinkled from the long flight. She was 38, I later learned, but in that moment she looked like a lost child. I was supposed to be here, she kept saying, pacing the small room like a caged animal. I had a presentation. I thought I had more time. I always thought I had more time. She sat in George's chair by the window, the same chair where he'd spent countless hours watching for her car in the parking lot below. Her shoulders shook with the kind of grief that comes not just from loss, but from regret. From all the phone calls cut short by deadlines, all the visits postponed by life's demands, all the words left unsaid. He died alone, she whispered into her hands. My father died alone, and the last conversation we had was about my stupid job, about why I couldn't come for Thanksgiving. What kind of daughter am I? That's when I knew it was time. George had given me a job, and Sarah needed what he'd left for her. I padded over to the dresser, standing on my hind legs to nose at the wooden box with brass corners. It was exactly where George had said it would be, polished smooth by years of his touch. Sarah looked up, tears streaming down her face. What is it, dog? What do you want? I pawed at the box again, then looked directly at her. Dogs have ways of communicating that go beyond words, and grief has a way of opening humans to messages they might otherwise miss. Something in my posture, my insistence, seemed to reach her. She stood slowly, approaching the dresser like it might hold secrets. Which of course it did. "This was my Father's Day gift to him," she said quietly, lifting the box with trembling hands. "I gave it to him 5 years ago, told him he could keep his important papers in it. I never knew if he actually used it." The box wasn't locked. Inside, Sarah found something that made her gasp and sink back into the chair. Dozens of small pieces of paper, some typed, some handwritten in George's careful script. Notes, letters, messages meant for her. She picked up the first one, dated just 3 days after her last visit over a year ago. "My dearest Sarah, you looked so tired when you left today. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I'm proud of how hard you work, but don't forget to rest. Your mother always said you were too much like me, too stubborn to admit when you need help. I love you, Dad." The next was from her birthday 6 months ago. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I tried calling, but it went to voicemail. I know you're busy. I sat by the window today and remembered your 16th birthday, when you were so excited about getting your license. You made me drive around the block 12 times just because you could. You've always been my adventurous girl. I hope life is still giving you adventures worth taking." Another, from just 2 weeks ago. "The Christmas tree went up in the lobby today. It reminded me of the year you made all those paper snowflakes and covered our entire house with them. Your mother complained about finding glitter for months afterward, but she hung every single one. I still have a few in my dresser drawer. Some things are too beautiful to throw away." Sarah read note after note, her tears falling onto paper that held 2 years of her father's love, worry, pride, and memories. Messages about her childhood, about how much he missed her, about how he understood why she couldn't visit. Not once did he write about being angry or feeling abandoned. Every single note was an expression of pure, patient love. The last note was dated the morning of December 18th, the day George had taken his turn for the worse. "My darling Sarah, if you're reading this, then I've gone to be with your mother, and Charlie has done his job. Don't be sad that you weren't here at the end. You were with me every day in these notes, in my heart, in every prayer I said for your happiness. You are the best thing I ever did with my life. Be kind to yourself, sweetheart. Forgive yourself, and know that every day you lived your life fully was a gift you gave to me. Love always and forever, Dad. P.S. Take care of Charlie. He's a good friend, and he'll understand your sadness better than most humans ever could." Sarah clutched the final note to her chest and wept with a raw intensity that seemed to shake the very walls of the room. But it wasn't just grief anymore. It was recognition, relief, the overwhelming realization that love had been there all along, waiting patiently in a wooden box with brass corners. I moved closer, resting my head against her leg the way I'd done with George so many times. She looked down at me with eyes that finally understood why I'd led her to the box, why her father had trusted me with this final gift. "You stayed with him, didn't you?" she whispered, stroking my fur with hands that still trembled. "You were there so he wouldn't be alone." I was there. I had been George's companion in his final days, his comfort in the long nights, his friend when loneliness threatened to overwhelm him. And now, somehow, I had become the bridge between a father's love and a daughter's grief. In that moment, watching Sarah discover her father's hidden treasure of words, I finally understood what George had been trying to teach me all along about the true nature of love and time. 3 months after George's passing, Sarah was cleaning out his old dresser when something caught her eye. Hidden beneath the drawer liner was a small brass key, the same brass that adorned the corners of his wooden box. But this key didn't fit that box. "What did you hide from me, Dad?" she whispered, searching every corner of room 237. Finally, taped to the underside of his windowsill, the same window where he'd watched for her, was a tiny piece of paper with numbers written in his careful handwriting. At the bank, the manager's hands trembled as he opened safety deposit box 847. Inside wasn't money or documents, but dozens of photographs. Pictures from Sarah's college graduation that she thought no one had attended. Photos of her first apartment, her promotion celebration, even one of her sleeping peacefully on the nursing home couch during her last visit. "He hired someone to take these," the manager explained quietly. "He wanted to be part of your life without intruding. He knew about your struggles, your successes. He was there for everything, miss." Sarah's hands shook as she flipped through image after image of her life. Moments she thought she'd experienced alone. But George had been watching from afar, celebrating her victories and worrying through her struggles. At the bottom of the box was a sealed envelope marked, "For Sarah's children." Inside, George had written letters to grandchildren he'd never met, grandchildren that didn't even exist yet. Letters about family history, about Sarah's childhood, about what kind of woman their mother was. "I don't even have children yet," Sarah sobbed. How did he know? The last letter was different. It was addressed to her, dated just 1 week before his death. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then you found my secret. I hope you understand now that love doesn't need permission to be present. I was never absent from your life. I was just loving you from a different angle. The photos are yours now. Show them to your children someday, and tell them their grandfather was always watching, always proud, always there." Sarah comes to Sunset Manor every Saturday now, carrying her father's old camera. She takes pictures of residents for families who can't visit, creating the same bridge of love that George built for her. She started a photo album for each resident, ensuring no moment of joy goes unwitnessed. Last weekend, she showed me a new picture she'd taken. An elderly woman in room 203, smiling at a letter from her son in California. "Dad taught me something, Charlie," she said, adjusting the photo in its frame. "Love isn't about being perfect or present. It's about believing in someone so deeply that you find ways to stay connected even when you can't be there." The wooden box still sits on her mantelpiece, but it's no longer the only keeper of secrets. Sarah's apartment is filled with photographs now. Some from George's hidden collection, some she takes herself, all of them proof that love finds a way to be present, even when we think we're alone. And so, in the quiet moments when the world feels heavy and love seems distant, remember this story from 4 Paws and a heart that witnessed love's greatest truth. Sometimes the most profound presence is the one we never see, but always feel.